there's a lot of speculation on who the next pope will be. Given Francis's ongoing health concerns, I'm recording this several days later in case something changes dramatically with that, but as the day I'm recording this, he has been announced to be staying in the hospital for several days due to complications and a more complicated diagnosis for the issues he was having, a respiratory tract infection. But there's been a lot of speculation on who the next pope will be. I tend to think that's premature, but it's understandable why people would start speculating on these things. I, however, am not one who thinks that it's going to matter that much, that the next pope will probably be, when it comes down to the brass tacks, not that different than Francis. Francis was the logical extension of the people who came before him. He just lacked the ability to hide any of his real ideas, or to maybe a lack of desire to play nice with people, and a willingness to throw out the hermeneutic of continuity, which had been adopted by his two predecessors as a way of essentially making it so that Catholicism was coherent, that it was the same religion as before, that to justify the changes that were made through a complex theological framework. Francis wasn't interested in playing that game, and it shows, especially in his hiring decisions, who he promoted to the episcopate, the bishops that he made, or that he allowed to be made. Yes, there were some decent choices in that time, but there were a whole lot of bad ones. And we go to a story today that really shows this. We have the story of somebody with absolutely null and invalid holy orders who cannot possibly confect the Eucharist at a Mass, being invited by a Catholic bishop to celebrate the Mass with them. This priest, or rather priestess, was invited by a Catholic bishop to celebrate, as if they were a Novus Ordo Catholic priest, the Eucharist at the altar. That's sacrilege. And this wasn't thought to be that big of a deal. We go to Rorate Chaley, who posted this on X. Quote, Anglican priestess, quote, celebrated with 80 Catholic priests and bishops the Novus Ordo Mass in celebration of the elevation of the Diocese of Chapeco, Brazil, to the rank of Metropolitan Archdiocese. Miss Vivian Schwanke de Oliveira was present at the altar with the priests and acknowledged by the new Archbishop. That's a remarkable summary of the article, but we'll go a little deeper into it because the article that they shared was from a Spanish language version of Catholic News, a Catholic News website. This was done with the bishops of that now archdiocese, with 80 of the diocesan priests there, in full view of the Catholic faithful. It doesn't look like it caused that much outrage. This is why I don't think it'll matter that much who the next pope is. Francis has chosen something like 80% of the cardinals who are going to select the next pope. And we've seen with his bishops' selections for the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops that he is a strategic thinker about who he is choosing for those offices. The bishops in the United States that he's chosen in the last few months have all been with an eye towards the new presidential administration in America to oppose them on their migration issues and things. In the same way, Francis was clearly planning for the coming conclave, whenever that is. Whether that's this year or 5 years from now, we don't know. But it's pretty obvious he was choosing for that as well. I don't know if it'll matter that much. Maybe I'm just being cynical, but I don't think I am. But let's see what these bishops were thinking in Brazil. Go to ACI Digital, which is essentially EWTN for South America. And we get this. This is translated by Google Chrome, so bear with the translation here. Quote, Vivian Schwanke de Oliveira, minister of the Anglican Episcopal Church of Brazil, celebrated the installation mass of the Archdiocese of Chapeco at the Santo Antonio Cathedral on Sunday. That's St. Anthony's Cathedral. The minister entered wearing a blue tunic and stole along with the priests and bishops in the entrance procession, stood in the presbytery, actively participated in the Eucharistic consecration, and received communion. Canon 908 of the Code of Canon Law prohibits, quote, Catholic priests from celebrating the Eucharist together with priests or ministers of churches or ecclesial communities that are not in full communion with the Catholic Church. Catholic ministers only lawfully administer the sacrament to Catholic faithful, who likewise only lawfully receive them from Catholic ministers, says Canon 844. The Mass was celebrated by the Archbishop of Chapecó, Dom Odelia Jose Magri, MCJ. He spoke of the ecumenical meaning of the presence of religious authorities at the celebration. He mentioned the presence of the Anglican minister, showing her at the altar, and the pastor of the Renovar em Cristo Church, who was sitting on the second pew of the church along with the other faithful. During the celebration, Father Francois Cristiano Cousteau, Chancellor of the Archdiocese, read the Pope's decree on the creation of the Archdiocese of Chapecó and the appointment of Dom Odelier Jose Magri. Kneeling before the altar, Dom Odelier professed his faith and reaffirmed his belief in the truth of the Word of God and the teachings of the Church. He also took an oath of fidelity, committing himself to maintain communion with the Church, preserving the integrity of the faith, and promote ecclesiastical discipline. The Mass was celebrated by approximately 80 priests and 7 bishops from Santa Catarina. The Bishop of Cacador, Dom Cleochir Bonetti, the Bishop of Lages, Dom Guilherme Verling, the Bishop of Yocaba, Dom Mario Marquez, the Auxiliary Bishop of the Archdiocese of Florianopolis, Dom Onecimo Aliberton, the Bishop of Rio de Sul, Dom Alberto Donadelli Jr., and the Archbishop of Joinville, Dom Francisco Carlos Bach. End quote. It's interesting that the bishop, the new archbishop, swore fidelity to the church's teaching, while then celebrating a Mass with somebody explicitly prohibited by canon law and by the theology of the church. Pope Leo XIII declared basically infallibly that the Anglican holy orders were null and void. This caused many Anglican male priests and bishops to seek validation of their holy orders by schismatic priests with valid holy orders. These were in the late 19th century when Leo XIII did this, and many of these priests went to old Roman and old Catholic priests and bishops and got their holy orders taken care of so they were valid. But that doesn't mean much because priestesses aren't valid priests under any circumstances. They don't have valid holy orders. And yet this bishop, who swore before God and everyone that he would uphold the teachings of the church, violated the teachings of the church in the most grotesque manner imaginable. All because he wanted to play nice with the world. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of our time. We have all of this to thank based on the post-conciliar push for ecumenical dialogue, which was not really a thing before Vatican II. The church condemned it over and over again, unless this dialogue was meant to correct errors that groups that were not submitting to the Roman pontiff believed about Catholicism to get them to come home for the salvation of their souls. That's the spirit of true ecumenical dialogue. Whatever we have going on these days is something else entirely. It's a different beast, something that we, as good Catholics, should not participate in. Certainly no bishop should be participating in this stuff, which will cause grave scandal now on an international scale. After all, if somebody like me is reporting on this, that generally means that people are paying attention and outraged by it. No word really on how the faithful in Brazil took this. Maybe they just sort of shrugged their shoulders. After all, it is the land of liberation theology, after all. South and Central America is deep in the grips of the Marxist-influenced theology that was planted by the other side of the Iron Curtain back during the Cold War and beforehand as a way to subvert and control, if not destroy, the Catholic Church. But I'm curious what you have to say about this. Let me know in the comments, please. Are you that surprised to see a story like this coming out of Brazil? If you know anything about the state of the church in South and Central America, it's far from being the Catholic place that it used to be. So this personally does not surprise me. I have come to expect this. And it does make me wonder, with bishops and archbishops like that and cardinals, and who will be participating in the next conclave, whatever that is, when they make decisions like this, what kind of decision are they going to make behind closed doors to choose the next pope? Let me know what you think of this in the comments. Please hit like and subscribe if you haven't. It certainly helps. So does sharing this on social media. That helps too. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.